And good day, everybody. Welcome to the 8th of July, 2025. I hope everybody's wonderful. I'm going to have a podcast with a lender this morning, so you can check that out. I'll post that probably at my YouTube page, First Responder Realtor. So you can go there. I'll probably have that up by noon. But I'm going to be talking to a local lender about what you need to be looking out for right now. Also, he's really dug in deeper than an Alabama tick with regard to what's going on in the mortgage world and what potentially might happen if the Fed does reduce those rates. And I know we've been talking about this for a while. If they do happen to break down from where they are, high sixes, low sevens, and that all depends very much on your own personal credit profile. But if they come down in the fours, this market's going to kick off like we saw back in 2021 and 2022. Standing room only properties being overbidded on. Will probably end up having multiple buyer scenarios for each individual property, and the sellers will be able to more than likely enjoy the benefits of buyers giving up a lot of rights when it comes to buying property. That's not a good benefit for buyers, but for sellers, the less contingencies that the buyers keep in place, the better for them, because properties typically don't cancel, don't fall out of escrow, and those sorts of things. But that's a slippery slope, because in some cases, people believe maybe they offered too much, they paid too much, and as they get closer into escrow, then sometimes they have that buyer regret. And when that happens, ultimately, buyers will cancel depending on how many of the contingencies they removed. In fact, back in that market, we did see certain buyers, and none of the buyers I represented did this, but we saw, of course, everybody's going to say that, right? But anyway, some of the buyers did actually remove all their contingencies, meaning at the very beginning, once they entered escrow, that was the reason why they were able to get their offer accepted above the other offers coming in. All things being equal, they gave up all their rights. They didn't care what they found in the property. They didn't care what the inspections revealed. They didn't care whatever investigations revealed. They only wanted to buy the house. And that puts them in kind of a predicament if they do discover something much bigger than they're able to handle. If they cancel escrow at that point, they'll lose their deposit. That's what that means, giving up all your contingencies, everything, immediately forfeiting your deposit if you happen to cancel escrow. Typically, in an escrow period, you do have some cushion in there. You have a particular time frame to get things done. And most of the contracts here in California, depending on what was negotiated, if you didn't change anything, most everything's about 17 days. So you have 17 days to get all your investigations done as a buyer. And I was talking to a lady yesterday that's probably going to come to an open house we have hosted this weekend on Claiborne. Anyway, 22206 Claiborne in Saugus. That being said, she had talked about some of the issues that she runs into when she talks to agents. And one of those happens to be agents basically telling people they need to give up this right or that right. And that doesn't really fit well within the puzzle, depending on the market. But once those buyers decided to cancel, if they discovered something really big, that deposit becomes the seller's property. And of course, everything's subject to litigation, right? You can sue anybody for anything. In fact, somebody can sue me for, child support when I don't have children, example. And I would have to now hire an attorney to try to disprove that in a lot of cases. Depending on how liberal or how conservative the state is, they might have some kind of a mechanism in place to get rid of that frivolous type of lawsuit if in fact it had no semblance to anything even possibly being able to happen that way. But money always changes hands. When you're going into escrow, make sure you understand your timeframes, because at some point you are going to have to remove those contingencies. Once you sign on the dotted line that says, yes, if I cancel after this, my deposit becomes property of the seller, you better be sure you really want the property. The lady that called yesterday, she was talking about investigating neighbors, and she has been in a 4-year issue with a property she purchased. Agent probably didn't do all they could to help her with an easement issue. The title company, though, did pick it up, and they're paying for everything. But this has been a 4-year battle trying to get certain things solved with a property this woman bought. She now wants to buy in Santa Clarita Valley. And just going through all of that mess, those investigations are super important for a lot of people. But she got so deep in, she couldn't cancel at that point. She continued through, but there was really no red flag at the time in escrow. It was after it closed when she started to discover some things that she wasn't made aware of. But those investigations are important. And if you feel like somebody's giving you the business and giving you answers to questions that are without validity, have them back that up in writing. Reach out to them and say, hey, Jack, listen, I appreciate you communicating with me. Appreciate you answering all these questions, but I do need to see this coming back to me in some kind of an email. So if you wouldn't mind, I would really appreciate it. Just let me know if, in fact, I understood you correctly. And then you can regurgitate the conversation with them in an email, and more than likely they'll respond back. All right, so as far as Santa Clarita Valley goes, we have 15 coming soon. 55 new listings have hit the market this past 7 days. 67 properties have had their prices changed. We were seeing price changes in the triple digits for a very long time. The market is starting to kind of level out here. You're going to watch people that are in other states comment about the California market. They're looking at different kind of online systems that are showing values. They don't really dig in so deep where they're looking at past sold prices and current sold prices. So they're really looking at the listing prices versus the sold prices, and they're calling that this market out here in Santa Clarita. And they don't specifically talk about Santa Clarita, but they talk about the markets here in Southern California actually going lower in values. We're not seeing that. It's just sellers are listing their property, add some buffer room in there. When buyers are coming in, they're offering less than that amount because they've done their research, they've looked at the comparables, and then they provide that to the seller as they work through those processes. So the seller then just doesn't think they're offering or trying to lowball them or take advantage. They can see it in writing, actually, what the buyer's thinking when they made this particular offer strategy. That's important to look at. All right, so let's get back to the active under contract properties. We have 27, 44 pending, and we have 19 properties that fell out of escrow. That's a little bit less than a typical week, but we are at the very beginning of the week. So that kind of, when you bring in the weekend time frames, typically Saturdays and Sundays, there's a lot less properties that actually cancel during those time frames. Usually it's Monday, Tuesday. And then we have 44 that sold this past week. With the new listings, 55, that's kind of an even number. So we're kind of replenishing at the same pace that we're selling these properties. And then, of course, you have 19 expired, 8 canceled, 16 put on hold, and 4 have been withdrawn from the market. I can't tell you the importance. I can tell you the importance of you investigating your neighbors. The lady that called yesterday, again, case in point, go with your agent before you start spending money. Go door knock those neighbors that are having could have some kind of authority over your property. The people that share property boundaries typically, and of course the ones across the street, you might want to go visit just to kind of, check in and see who they are. Are they tenants? Are they owners? And, just kind of get a good feel. And your agent should be pretty good at this. I mean, my God, we're in the business of advertising ourselves. So then banging on the door and acting like Bob Barker shouldn't be an issue. That's the Price is Right guy. Anyway, and that's a show that was on. You'll have to look that up if you're a newer person on the planet. So that's important. So go talk to those neighbors, find out who they are, have your agent make the introduction, and do this before you start spending money, just in case you run into somebody you have a restraining order against, or maybe an ex you had no idea lived there that you didn't have a great separation from. These sorts of things. Good to know. I'm Connor with Honor. Thank you for watching. Santa Clarita openhouses.com. We'll be back tomorrow in another show. Tomorrow's going to be the 9th. We'll do a hump day. We'll talk about the foreclosure listings and those types of distressed properties. We don't see a lot of those, but there are several here in Santa Clarita, including short sales, not making so much of a comeback, but there are about a handful of properties that are short sale in scope. We'll talk about those tomorrow, and also what it means to have a property show up as a bankruptcy or some kind of a probate sale when that listing price is incredibly low, a lot lower than comparable value. That could be an issue for your buyers out there. If you get excited, want to go all in, you might find out that once it gets approved, it's not going to be approved at your all-in price. So now you've wasted a lot of time. And in fact, depending on how your offer is structured, you might have actually put a deposit in, and getting that back might not be as easy as you think. In addition, there could be charges against your deposit as well for services rendered. So make sure you read the small print and follow that question up with your agent. Hey, listen, if I put this deposit down on this bankruptcy or this type of property, what does it mean when I want to cancel, get it back? What does it take? And are there going to be any additional charges taken out of that deposit? Because realistically, folks, I've seen that come across my desk where escrow companies are going to want extra funds to be able to release the deposit. that's in my brain, I don't like it, and it's something that I've been able to skate my clients away from. Might want to pay attention, ask your agent, and see how they've been successful in negotiating that little critical piece of the real estate puzzle. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Be well. It's always finding the stop button is difficult. Found it.